When you think of devs listened, the first thing that comes to your mind is Wuthering Waves, but I'm here to tell you that there is a now more appropriate contender of that title. Not only has this game implemented a ton of feedback over the course of its lifespan, but also proactively implemented features that gave a more enhanced user experience. However, it wasn't always a comfort game as it is today, and in this video we're going to take a detailed look at the history of Snowbreak Containment Zone. Snowbreak was developed by a small studio that didn't have much of a reputation in the gacha industry. I mean, I don't think many of you have heard of Sun, much like I haven't heard of them pre-release of this game. Considering the game had a small studio and had a unique approach to the gacha gaming market, with that being a third-person waifu shooter, there was definitely some potential to land success in the space. Now, success is determined by how well your game does relative to the amount of money it costs to develop the game. This game wasn't going to be the meta-defining game of the gacha genre, but it was definitely a game that could cave out its own niche. The beta testing players knew that at the very least. While those same players did enjoy what the game brought in those CBTs, there was also other issues in the game that would need immediate attention towards the launch of the game. And sadly, there was an overwhelming amount. Snowbreak's launch was a catastrophic failure. I mean, there was a bunch of bugs ridiculed into the game, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding the game's monetization model, which we'll get into in the video. Both the character and the weapon banners had 50-50 rates, with it guaranteed after losing said 50-50 that at the very least would transfer between banners. A further slight upside to that is that the best characters were part of the standard banner, with the current limited character being a support that you may or may not need. Katya wasn't a game-changing support at the time of launch, because the resources needed for this character to come online was quite hefty. If we were to take lastly into consideration that the standard banner 5 stars, 2 of which were meta damage dealing characters, whom at least had more immediate value for your account, the game was quite free-to-play friendly on a further glance. I mean, the game literally gave you a newbie banner much like the one present in Honkai Star Rail that gives a random standard 5-star character to 50 roles in the banner. You would also receive a standard banner selector for any 5 of the present 5 stars on the standard banner, but this came after clearing an early part of the story chapters. If we factored in players rerolling like myself, despite the game having notoriously a gacha model that was meta at the time, there really wasn't much money to be made for Snowbreak Containment Zone at the time of launch. You circumvented the issues these systems presented by not only the free 5 stars given to the player, but also saving yourself the headache of the 50-50 on the present limited banner that you could lose on while you've invested a lot of time and resources into your account. We also know that games of this gacha system typically have a small starting roster, which gives more value to the reroll process. And all of these factors would contribute to the low revenue this game faced in its launch month. The game started off with many bugs and very poor monetization despite having a shared system with the most successful gacha in the industry. What the heck was going on? As you progressed your account into the mid-game, you realized that there was a system that allowed you to passively farm out duplicate tokens for your gacha characters that could convert into actual copies of said character, which defeated the purpose of rolling for a character multiple times on their banner. How the heck are they going to make money with a model just like this? You would eventually get duplicates of the character with no energy costs from the daily grind. That would leave the only monetization in the game that at least had a little bit of selling power, with that being the weapon banner. Considering the weapon banner had a different currency to roll on said banner, you would need to convert your premium currency into pools for the banner, which is no different than the games that shared this same gacha system, yes. The kicker was that at launch, weapon refinements went all the way to 5 with a present 50-50 system on the same banner. Considering weapons gave the biggest power boost to characters, some of those characters feeling borderline unusable without said weapon, the game at least banked on something predatory it could monetize on its audience. This was true until the complaints started to kick in. Now I'm all for making changes for the player, and if you're going to implement something like this, then I think it's a net positive for every single player, and having the 50-50 weapon banner go from 5 copies to max out the weapon into going to only 2 copies to max out the weapon, and you can honestly go for those same copies in the shop if you have duplicates of other weapons, was a very nice change overall for the health of the game and for the player. Definitely not the best for the devs' pockets, let's just say that. Many launch spenders were upset with the state of the game. I mean, you had a game that took the same exact monetization from a game that delivered on the quality, but expected similar results without delivering on the quality from their title. The math clearly wasn't mathing. Why would players spend for multiple copies of a weapon on a character if the game was in a completely buggy state? And being completely unsatisfied with the state of the game as they were. I mean, to play devil's advocate, Genshin Impact players still complain about the horrendous gacha system and the anxieties it brings to this day, even though there's still contempt with the base game. But you see, that's the difference. The early players of Snowbreak and Containment Zone weren't contempt with the base game. So therefore, any other issue just pretty much made the fire grow stronger. It just wasn't worth the anxieties that came along with the predatory monetization. No matter how much unique the gameplay was compared to any gacha in the market, if your game was in a borderline unplayable optimized state, as much as this game was, no player could witness how unique the game was. And this was the catastrophic launch of Snowbreak Containment Zone. Now, I'm not here to only just say the negatives of Snowbreak Containment Zone's launch. There was definitely quite a few redeeming qualities of the game, one of those being how often the game will give you freebies despite the honeymoon phase of the gacha. You were showered resources in any game, but with Snowbreak especially, you got a ton of freebies from early on to where the game felt very free to play friendly to players. The game was also pretty engaging if you were on PC, as mobile wasn't the best optimized. If you were able to at least run the game, then you were met with a very pretty structured game with a lot of interesting gameplay moments and boss fights that felt very different to what the industry offered at the time. Let's not forget that the game had a very short daily grind structure that would blend nicely into the weeklies as well. Snowbreak is notoriously known for having the shortest daily grind of any gacha I can think of at the time of my recording of this video. You literally log in and you pretty much complete your dailies by just spending energy, and that's it. It takes a total of maybe 30 seconds to get your dailies done from start to finish, and that is very low maintenance, which would contribute to the honest downfall of the game early on. It's not often that you have a game that allows you to auto-clear in-game content that rewards you with premium currency. Even a skip button was present for the main story and event story. Snowbreak could comfortably fit into your daily gacha game fix. However, all these benefits would be a part of why the game would feel like a failure for those launch players. Too many freebies and free characters will mean your character grinding resources would bleed out. And I mean bleed out extremely quick, as this was a very prominent issue for players at launch. Having a game that wasn't demanding of your time as much, if at all, would feel like a game that you could barely play. Which, for a game like Snowbreak, with its engaging gameplay, would feel like a net negative for a lot of the hardcore players. A game that felt like it was made and optimized for the PC pool would mean that any player without that specific platform would feel unable to partake in the launch of the game, as it was horribly optimized for those mobile devices, which is still a massive source of traction in the mobile gaming market. The game would have a few limited character releases that felt as if the game was progressively becoming more suggestive with the character designs present, such as the release of Haru in patch 1.2 and the fact that the character showed underboob. How the game evaded censorship early on is beyond me, but this is something that worked in the devs' favor for the short to medium term of the game, and honestly, they lucked out in that regard. However, what's important to note is that the present skins around this point in time wouldn't be anything that was nearly as progressive as the current era of Snowbreak, so in reality, the revenue wouldn't improve, and the steadily decline of Snowbreak was ever so present. Despite Haru being a very fun and engaging character to use that felt like the best AoE character that this game had, there wasn't anything aside from the default outfit of the character that really appealed to not only players that spend on the game, but the overall community. Don't get me wrong, I remember seeing someone in the chat of a gacha streamer mentioning this character's outfit to the streamer for their overall thoughts, but there wasn't enough of these word-of-mouth moments that would put more eyes into the game, as the devs were adamant on not marketing their own game, again contributing to the arrogant title the devs had that, in my opinion, was an understatement. It wouldn't be until the next patch where we got a clear understanding of where the game direction was going, with the release of the Summer Resort event in Snowbreak. Now, having a summer event in a gacha game is a very low-hanging fruit, and to be quite honest, it makes a lot of sense as to why this would be in the game. I mean, for one, it's a game that was already steering towards that direction, and it was the perfect time to give the players something that may or may not break the future of the game, and let's just say, it did really well. So most of the time, when a summer event is present in a gacha game, the players are going to be expecting that at the very least, having your characters and loot and revealing outfits. Now let me just say, Snowbreak not only delivered on the minimum, but also gave much more than players expected, not only just the sexual content of the patch, but also the gameplay contents offered as well, which honestly took me for a surprise. For the first time, CSUN would implement an actual open world into the patch that gave Snowbreak a lot more breathing room as an environmental shooter gacha game. Not only was the open world interactive, but it also came with a very solid reward structure for the player, while still remaining engaging content-wise. Now, as for the cream of the crop in this patch, the skins were way more revealing than what the game had currently offered, and each of the featured characters had their own animations with said outfit, the most notable one being a skin for Shenxing, which shows her literally dropping ice cream on her breast. The devs cooked most certainly. There would be, however, one controversy in this patch, but if you think it's because of the loot revealing skins and potential censorship, you are sorely mistaken. It was quite literally the most pointless controversy this game would ever face.
Hopefully eventually you get it. You can be angry about it. Bottom line is, it's an incentive for people spending in the game. If you don't like that, then don't get the skin. It's not a big deal.
There was a skin released for one of the top tier damage dealers that everyone had access to. This character, y'all, when Solstice was the best character for bossing by far, and this same character had a skin that was unobtainable for free-to-play or low spenders at the time, because it was purely a top-up incentive skin. Essentially a monetization structure that rewards you for spending more money onto the game. So for instance, if you spend $100 into the game, then I may have a reward present in said game to give you that reward once you do spend that $100. So in the instance of Snowbreak Containment Zone, if you spend at least $200 US, sorry of course for the other region gamers, you were eligible to claim this skin from the top-up incentive. This would cause a massive outrage, which again makes sense as to why it happened. The skin has the best looking splash art the game has ever seen, even comparative to what's present at the current era of the game, and the skin was for the best / most used character at the time, being the one that players had heavily invested into. So there was definitely a lot of baggage that came along with this, but in all honesty, it was just a cosmetic, and that should never ever cause many complaints, especially with it being one that you would receive over the course of time as being a small spender of the game. I'm all for being free to play and receiving free content, but not everything should be free, and the content of Snowbreak Containment Zone with its declining revenue, nothing should be free if they can help it. As this controversy rolled over and players realized at a second glance the situation wasn't what they thought it was, the game would begin to see happier days. I mean, we would think so, as the community felt more healthy than it was at launch, and the game seemed to be taking more jabs at what could improve its overall state for the longevity of the title. This was apparent with the increase in fan service provided by Snowbreak and the increase in personal interactions that the self-insert MC would have with each and every single character in the patches. So in the case of Snowbreak, having a cast of only female characters would pretty much foster a full straight male demographic. But let's be completely honest here, this was the demographic that was bringing in the most money or the most potential money for the game, and it makes a lot of sense as to why the game continued to go this route. I'm not saying there wasn't any girls that play Snowbreak Containment Zone. I do see girl names on Snowbreak Containment Zone in the global chat, assuming that those are actually people that are behind the... This came more into play when you take into consideration that the male character's splash art from the logistics, or in this game, gear sets, will be halted entirely for future updates and removed retroactively from the current existing ones. At this point, the devs were locked in on what they wanted the game to become. As the game continued to transition into the direction of a fan service third-person shooter, that would also come with its own set of issues, changing the game's identity in a sense from a more so focused objective-based third-person shooter with now more emphasis on the characters and their interactions with you, would deter some of the core audience and bring in a new one. The players that felt they weren't getting the same enjoyment from the game they once were, and whether that's from lack of getting what they wanted from the game or the steadily change in the game's core identity, the issue was ever so present for them. As the game did grow, so would a subset of issues with the game, which is kind of normal for any game that fosters a wider audience. But this particular controversy was on CSUN themselves. Snowbreak around this point in time would do something that genuinely gave worry to the global audience of the game in the short term: the removal of English VAs for the game. This in itself wasn't a good sign from CSUN, as not only did they not have a good track record of making the right decisions at this point in time, but also another issue that would weaken the confidence of their players. So why would they bother with removing the English VAs altogether? Money and lack of global support, really. There wasn't enough revenue coming from the global side of the game to justify paying for global features that only the global players would benefit from, whereas keeping the primary language VAs was more profitable and again was backed by revenues from all regions. This not only presented as an issue for the company in the short term, but any player that was spending money at the time on the global side of the game, as the future of this game was still uncertain. Around this period in time, there would be a sort of test character with the release of Tess, the most blatant example of fan service in a Snowbreak character. Not only did she have the biggest breast proportions, but she also had a very interesting design when we talk about the skin that came along with her. And the fact of the matter is, this skin would essentially lose clothing after using your ultimate, which gave a more immersive experience and gave incentive to actually use the character on your team comps. Because for once, we had a skin that was actually interactive in the combat itself, which was never seen at the time, especially when taking into consideration the actual scale of model this game has compared to other games in the gacha market. Now, this concept wasn't introduced by Snowbreak. Let me just preface that before we continue with the rest of this conversation. I mean, all the time do you have characters in games that change their appearance upon using ultimates. Despite CISA not taking measures to promote the game to a wider audience, more word of mouth would spread on behalf of the game, and this was the power of what Snowbreak had to offer. This essentially is what prompted Snowbreak to continue to see its continued growth and success despite the company, again, not promoting their own game. At the time of you watching this video, you'll probably have a lot to say based on what I just said, in terms of censorship and all that jazz. But don't worry, we will have the discussion later in the video. Snowbreak would gain more and more popularity, but it wouldn't receive its uncontested biggest breakthrough until the release of Katya in patch 1.5. Now, Katya isn't just your typical provocative character. Early in the video, I mentioned each character having a dynamic with the MC that feels different from character to character. Katya was the first character to really turn the game into its harem approach that is very much so known for today. Katya made advances on your character much more than any of the other girls. She was also a lot more mature and did more adult-tailored things, which given the demographic of the game, this success this character brought really doesn't surprise me. She had a personality that felt really fleshed out and refreshing compared to the rest of the cast. If we were to talk about her appearance, it became even more apparent that this character would eventually become the most popular amongst the cast. Katya was, in my opinion, the biggest contributor to Snowbreak's turnaround and shift in player reception, as it was very much so possible to design a character that was not only different than your mascots, but one that took all of the interest away from the other characters. As time went on, Snowbreak would find itself going further and further away from end of service. As the reality began to settle in most players of the game had seemed to be satisfied with the current state of the game. And to be fair, this was after the company basically unintentionally weeded those out that didn't want anything to do with the fan service route the game was taking. It also became apparent that everyone except a subset of players wasn't in fact satisfied with everything offered, this being the content creators of the game. As someone who was once upon a time a Snowbreak creator, I know, believe it or not, I made videos on other games aside from Honkai Star Rail, the Snowbreak Containment Zone content creator program wasn't anything to scoff about, because for many months they essentially lied to us. Now over time we kind of knew that was the case, but we just didn't say anything. Now most other content creator programs present in other games act this very same way. The difference is if the company loses out on any sources of revenue or traction for the game. In the case of Snowbreak, they had lost a lot already and couldn't afford to lose its dedicated content creators. Now surely content creators only play a small role in the online community of the game and not the offline one. And for further clarification, I'm talking about the global side of the game. However, I've known many of the content creators partnered with the game to be some of the most unconditionally devoted and passionate creators I've seen for any game. It was apparent with the not only low analytics behind the game and how detrimental that is for the content creator's career, but also with the company being what they were at the time, so arrogant. This was brought into limelight with various creators, and the company was receiving a lot of bad publicity. And once you got accepted to the creator program, you were promised all these benefits and all these great things, and the company would take you in with open arms with their best interests, or your best interests, or you know what? The interests of nobody, because they did nothing. Absolutely nothing. This creator program is a joke, just like Nonpon said, because they did absolutely nothing. In short, they weren't upholding their part of the content creator program in terms of the rewards given to the creators. You might be thinking, why should I care? The truth is, you don't have to. These were the same creators that also shared the same unconditional enjoyment for the game that you also had, but really went the extra mile of giving more exposure to the game, good or bad. The same creators also gave you news coverage, important breakdowns of characters, and sometimes even rewards. They were being treated unjustly by CSUN, and with enough backlash, there would be an overhaul to the creator program. Creators were now being appropriately rewarded for their work. I can't say too much because of course NDA. Creators were also eligible to give their viewers extra rewards, of course more dependent on luck, but still the incentive was there. CSUN was finally being a lot more transparent with the community, and on behalf of the company, the producer himself decides to make a Twitter account with various regular posts of him interacting with the community. CSUN would also be more receptive to the community on patch releases, whether that's giving underperforming character various buffs or giving cultured buffs to various outfits of the characters. The point is that CSUN was doing a lot better and striving towards improving the health of the game, and given how much closer the game was to reaching its first year mark, they really wanted to give refreshed notions to the previous impressions that was left on the ex and existing players. Leading up to the anniversary was big for the community, but also anyone looking to get into the game, because not only did the game receive its own client from Steam, but also many issues had been addressed, giving a better overall user experience. Snowbreak would also change the gacha system for the better, making each 5-star unit in the patch more accessible for the consistent playing player. There would be a 50-50 less banner implemented for both the character and weapon banners, giving the players a sense of choice. Having this option was a pipe dream for those that didn't want to deal with the frustrations of the 50-50 gacha meta, and it alleviated all the anxieties that came along with it. I really wish other games would follow suit, but for those games, they're pretty much making a lot of money with the current existing 50-50 system they may or may not have. So, in all honesty, why do they need to change? It's not like changing the gacha is going to give them more money. In fact, it's just going to make their money go down. However, despite the prayers being heard, it just wasn't enough to evade the bullets that was coming their way. And by bullets, I mean the censorship. CSUN had a very prominent issue to deal with the short term, because this would be catastrophic with the health of the game, if not properly addressed. Snowbreak had received a bunch of warnings with its current character and skin designs. The splash arts of various characters and skins couldn't evade this either. Not only were many of the cleavages and under area of many characters were altered, but the actual discontinuation of the skins took effect. Snowbreak at the very least could give players a chance to buy the previous skins before they were to be removed from the game indefinitely. One of those skins garnering the attention of the masses.
Look at these games. Oh my god. You can peak fiction? I guess you can hold her hand. What are you're petting them? This is called Snowbreak. Oh, she feeds you. Oh wow.
Alongside the skin was the first interactive scene implemented, which gave insight into the future of the game. but for this to happen quite literally a patch after felt very risky for existing and potential buyers to participate. When the state of the game became volatile as it currently was, most players will just sit on the sidelines not wanting anything to do with the said game, because everything was uncertain. So following this controversy, CSUN was to give every player that purchased a skin during the 1.8 patch not only the option to keep said discontinued skin, but also a free character selector for any of the previously released limited characters in the game, excluding the most recent one, that being Cirrus Kasana. Considering this was a catastrophic mess up, the compensation felt very appropriate, and they were to give further reassurance that everything was going to be okay. And as a naive player, I thought so too. When the first anniversary was to drop, the game not only received the biggest highlight to this day, but also there was a lot of extra stuff that came with the patch for the players that gave a very nice anniversary experience for not only the new, existing, and the pre-existing players. It was a time to be alive, let's just say that. Not only did it contribute to the most revenue the game had saw, but also the player count as well. CSUN implemented 2 new interactive scenes with the mascots of the game being both Life and Fenny. During this patch, most of the players called her Wife instead of Life, which you'll see why in just a second. In the 2 interactions, you could not only have a marriage with said character, but you also went on a honeymoon and actually kissed the character. It only got better as the player realizes that you can have further intimacy with the character, which prompted the "sex soon" meme, which implies having sexual intercourse with said character. Now, it doesn't matter to me whether you think this is weird or not, but for a game to go this far with their character interactions was unforeseen. Not only do most games go through censorship issues, but there is also various other issues that came along with doing something of this magnitude. And considering how provocative the characters were at this point, meant CSUN was pretty much flying really close to the sun, which we'll of course talk about at the end of the video. For now, the new, returning, and existing players got to spend an anniversary with a company that had their players' best interests in check. Not only was Fenny a free character given to the player, a free limited weapon of choice was given away, and you also had various other quality of life implemented that reduced the FOMO and resource drought in Snowbreak Containment Zone. This was probably just about the best anniversary I have ever seen from a gacha game of this quality, rivaling that of Nikke Goddess of Victory, and God, you know just how much they give away when it comes to their anniversaries. Actually, at the time of my recording of this video, that game is currently in its 2nd year anniversary. Snowbreak Containment Zone will lose out on something that in my opinion was a very strong marketing tool they had. With another controversy surrounding the game's post-anniversary, there would be talks about a past hired cosplayer of the game that some CN fans were not fond of. Apparently, those CN players found out that this particular cosplayer made comments in the past about straight males on social media in 2015. Considering that was 9 years ago, I'm always under the impression that people and their worldview can change over time, but those particular CN players didn't share that same sentiment. They actually complained to CSUN, and with enough backlash, CSUN was to remove their current hired cosplayers and discontinue this for the future. These cosplayers are content creators after all, and removing them is removing a form of your marketing, and you are putting them out of a job too, which I'm not fond of. Now, how this matter was handled behind the scenes, we don't know. This would be another controversy the game found itself in, and with the simple fact that this was way blown out of proportion, the community would do nothing but bash those CN players that started this whole drama. Snowbreak was the talk of the gacha town. I mean, you couldn't go in any form without hearing games needing to go the Snowbreak route, of course if their game was on the decline in terms of revenue. This was what Snowbreak had fostered for itself, and the community could not stop with the meme. And honestly, I think it's a very honest meme, because going the Snowbreak route can make or break the future of a game. It honestly saved the game from going into service. So it makes a lot of sense why this became a meme that still stands true to this day. They were giving their players what they wanted and more. Truly the most generous gacha game I could think of at the time of me recording this video, and no, this is not sponsored. There was massive quality of life, and the game's daily maintenance to reward structure was in favor of the player, which contributes to the nice economy Snowbreak offers the average gacha player. it fits comfortably into the daily gacha rotation. Everything was smooth sailing from here on out, and the revenue was at an all-time high. There was nothing that could stop Snowbreak as it had gone this far. Speak for myself, I guess. I was very naive to have these same thoughts. October 30th, or present-day Snowbreak, was to feature the game finding its whole current vision obliterated by the CCP. CCP is short for the Chinese Communist Party, or the governing party that China as a whole must abide by. Snowbreak would be hit by said party for not abiding by the standards put in place for pornographic or lewd graphical material. This also meant that Snowbreak's censorship changes of the game would have to be implemented for both the global and Chinese version. This further meant that the trust of the players had once again been tarnished, as the spinning player was spinning because they thought this wasn't going to happen again. When you look at the situation outside in, it's pretty much inevitable that this would be what happened. Despite CSUN taking measures to reduce the doom posting that was going on at the time, such as giving the players that bought skins and lewd content during the patch that was censored the premium currency used to buy said skin or lewd content, and giving those players the option to keep the skins that were censored for free, and also giving a temporary fix such as changing the localization text in your files to keep the decensored version of the game that took place, of course, before the update of the censorship. That wasn't enough to stop the players from doom posting, but it makes a lot of sense given the genre we are in and the chaos that does take place after anything controversy does happen within the community. Despite all of the previous game changing for the better efforts and things given to the player for free, nothing mattered. You can do 1,000 things right and no one will remember, but you can do 2 things wrong and everyone will remember. Is essentially the moral of the story. Now, there is a measure that does currently give you the material back uncensored in Snowbreak Containment Zone, but that's as of right now. It could change in the future or it could be removed altogether. We'll have to, of course, wait and see. I will say, though, that the current gen vision of Snowbreak hasn't changed and is seemingly going to lead us to our end goal, SEGs. The question is, will the CCP bust our butts before the SEGs update? We'll have to wait and see. Thank you for watching, and have a nice rest of your day. So you thought the video ended there? No, yeah, I thought so too. Snowbreak Containment Zone just can't get enough of controversy. With the new release of 2.3, there was quite a few issues that I experienced myself while playing through the version and that other players have experienced too, to the point where the company had to not only fire some staff, but make a very huge statement. Snowbreak would have a very tough to swallow recent story addition to the game, and a lot of CN players were very upset about this new story and the progression of the story and where it was leading to. So far to the point where CSUN themselves decided to make the statement and remove and fire those people that worked on this part of the story. And now the whole part of that story is being reworked into something that more aligns with the actual story that Snowbreak players are familiar with. Now, if I'm being honest here, not only has Snowbreak lost some of its VAs, some of its cosplayers, and now some of its employees over the course of literally 1 year. You just have to wonder, what the heck is going on with this game? All I can say at this point is that the future of this title will be interesting to follow up with.